I'm Corolla. On socials, I'm at From Corolla. Here we have a package from Hemlock Oak, a Canadian planner and notebook brand. And I'm excited to unbox and give you a closer look at two new products in their 2026 lineup made from 70 GSM Archivist paper. And this is paper that's exclusive to Hemlock Oak. So we're going to do a writing and drawing sample. I'm going to throw a bunch of pens at the paper and see how it performs. So I did take a quick peek at one of the products, which is the Undated Weekly and Daily Planner, but I did want to show you what the packaging looks like when you unbox their products from Hemlock Oak. So you do get a really cute thank you card, and their packaging is made from sustainable packaging, and so you can recycle this and you can feel good about it. So I ordered the graph notebook cloth flex in Fawn cover, and I got graph because I'm a graph person, so that is what I prefer. I ordered this initially because I wanted to test out the paper. It's new on the market, it's made in Canada, and it's exclusive to Hemlock Oak, and so I wanted to test it out. And Hemlock Oak kindly offered to send me the weekly and daily undated planner, also made with 70 GSM paper. And so, of course, I jumped at the chance to try it out. And so we'll test both. Both notebooks, but I'll mainly focus on the planner because I think a lot of people are going to be curious and also wanting to try out the planner products with the 70 GSM paper. And they also threw in brass paper clips. So first we'll take a look at the notebook, and then we'll dive into the planner and do a little bit of a test on both. So this is the cloth flex Fawn cover graph notebook. It comes with 288 pages of the new Archivist 70 GSM paper, and it's meant to be smooth, uncoated, and fountain pen friendly. And so we'll do a little bit of a test of pens and fountain pen ink later to see. All their journals are crafted in Canada with sustainable, high-quality materials. So that's kind of good to know. One thing to note as well is the Archivist 70 GSM is a work in progress. And so it is somewhat of a trial basis. Hemlock Oak is very open to feedback. So if you do get one of their notebooks and you have some feedback about its performance with some of the pens that you like using, let them know. The great thing is that they do make it in Canada, and they work very diligently on improving their paper and their products, and they're very open to feedback. And so, if you try it out and you see it behaves a certain way with your stationery tools, feel free to let them know. Now for the planner. This is the Undated Weekly and Daily Planner. It's hardcover, and I got the Buttercup cover. It's actually pretty hefty in terms of what it contains and sort of the size of the book as well. It's an A5, 576 pages. And this one is made from the 70 GSM Archivist paper as well. So I'm going to do a quick flip through. If you're not aware of what the Hemlock Oak weekly and daily planner contains, you sort of have a title page, index, have a little bit of an intro to the planner and the planner system. And I like these pre-printed layouts. So you can sort of go through and set up your year, set up your goals, and set yourself up for success pretty much. So if you are looking to use this planner to help you achieve goals and reflect on certain things, then this first section would probably be really helpful for you, especially because a lot of people like having prompts that walk them through the process of creating those goals and tracking them as well. So after you have this sort of section of goals to work on, you sort of dive into yearly planning, and because it's undated, you can fill in the months as you want. Then we have quarterly planning, which is a great sort of space to track things or have certain events in here. Then we jump into monthly calendars, and so you have a 12-month planner pretty much in here. After every month, I find it interesting that there's a review of the month that has passed, as well as an overview of the upcoming month. And I think that's pretty interesting and handy to use if you like to reflect and think about the month that's coming up. So after the monthly planning section, we dive into weekly planning. And this is the vertical layout, and it contains a column here as well where you can jot down your focus, your intentions, and just your weekly log of tasks that you want to accomplish. And then you have Monday to Sunday with a timeline that starts from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. And it's all of your weeks are in one section after your monthly layouts or monthly spreads. And then you jump into the daily planning section after the monthly and the weekly. And here you have 365 undated pages in this planner for your daily tasks, your schedule. So you have a timeline here for your schedule. You have a list here where you can list tasks, or you can disregard the checkboxes and you can use this space for journaling or for other things. And the top you have intentions space, or you could put in your priorities or anything else. So I find that pretty useful. After the daily section, you have the year-end review. So at the end of the year, you can do a quick review or highlights, looking ahead to the following year. And then you have 21 blank graph pages at the back, so you can track or journal or do anything else. And that is the weekly and daily undated Hemlock and Oak planner. And so you can see that there's a lot of sections here. You have 365 pages of daily pages, and then on top of that you have all of the weekly pages and all the monthly. And so I think this planner could be a lot heftier if it weren't for the 70 GSM paper. And so having it as a 70 GSM paper, I think, is a great move because it sort of cuts down on the bulk and the weight of this type of book. So first, I'm going to test out some of the standard stationery tools and pens and pencils that I tend to use on the daily basis. And hopefully this sort of encompasses the types of tools that you would use as well. And we'll take a look to see whether it feathers, ghosts, or bleeds on this type of paper. And after trying the standard tools, we'll move on to fountain pens, fountain pen inks, as well as paints. So I'm just going to start by testing a few standard stationery tools. Of course, I use a lot of pencils and pens, and so this paper should handle these types of tools just fine. And I will say that the paper does feel smooth, and it's meant to be uncoated, so we'll see how it performs. So this is the Tombow Monograph mechanical pencil. Then we have the Jetstream pen that you get from, this one's from Hobonichi. It's just the multi pen. Then we have the Uni One gel pen. I know a lot of people like using gel pens in their planner, as do I. Then we have the Zebra Sarasa Grand, And this is an 05 as well. This is a friction pen, 07. Then we have a fine liner, the Tombow Mono Drawing Pen 05. I like to draw with this sometimes. And then we have two highlighters, the Mono Edge from Tombow, and the Zebra Mild Liner. I also have a Zig Clean Color Dot marker, which I know a lot of people use for tracking purposes. Then we move on to the brush pens. So we have a Tombow Fudenosuke, or the Tombow Foodie, and a soft tip. Then we have the Pentel brush pen. And then this one is the Tom Studio Lumos. And on one side, I have a brush tip, which uses fountain pen ink. So a sort of, so it's a standard black ink. Lumos is a dual tip pen, which you can refill, and you can also change out the tips. And so this one, I have a fine liner on this side, and it is an 05. Both of these tips are refillable with fountain pen ink. Then we get to the hefty Tombow dual brush pens, which I like to use for lettering as well as for headers. And I also like to use it for highlighting, or for sort of highlighting the header and writing on top of it. So that's another way of using these dual brush pens. So let's go ahead and do the same test in the planner. I'm going to do a little bit of a test using different types of fountain pens and dip pens, paint brushes, and similar. So that way we can test out the paper a little bit more and see how much it can handle. So this is the Sailor Fude pen with standard black fountain pen ink. And then I have a Platinum 3776 with Platinum Carbon Black, which is a waterproof black ink. The nib is an ultra extra fine, so this is pretty much as fine as a nib can go. And now we're going to try and go a little bit broader. This is the Pilot 823, so Pilot Custom 823. And the nib that I have with this is the signature nib, and so it's a little bit more of a stub nib. and puts down a little bit more ink. Then we have a Maker pen. This pen is made by Skogsy, and I wanted to try this pen out because the nib I have in here has been customized by Kirk from Pen Realm. And the fun thing about this nib is that on the correct side, it's a monoline. And so it puts down a pretty wide line. But on the reverse side, it's cursive italic. And another fun fountain pen that I have is the Skogsy Baby Soero, and the nib is from Franklin Christoph. It's a BB SIG, so it's a double broad SIG nib, which puts down a nice wide or broad line. The reason why I wanted to use this pen is because I have Platinum Chokuro, which is a very dark waterproof ink. So those are the fountain pens and fountain pen inks. What I want to do now is I want to use a glass dip pen because I also like to do creative art using glass dip pen, and so we're going to try that out. And for this, I'm going to use a fountain pen ink called Juliet by Waringool. It's a very pretty pink color. It also has shimmer, so it's a gold shimmer ink. So this is a medium glass dip nib, and it does feel a little scratchy on the paper, and I think it makes it look a little bit finer than it actually would, and that could be partly due to the reason that the paper is uncoated, so it's not as smooth to the glass tip. The other dip pen that I'm going to test is the Kakimori stainless steel nib. And this nib I use for swatching inks. If I can hold the ink. There we go. And for writing as well. And so you can tell right away that the ink is sitting on top of the paper and it's starting to absorb. And so that might take a little while to absorb, actually. And I'm going to do a little bit more painting as well. So I like to paint with fountain pen inks. If you follow my work, then you know that I like to paint abstract flowers using fountain pen ink. And so I'll do a little piece here. And then as well, I wanted to try watercolor paint. Then I wanted to try out a few stamps or stamp pads. So if you're into stamping in your journal, then my sort of go-to is the Versa Magic chalk ink. But this one is also a really nice stamp pad, the Shachihara stamp pad. But this doesn't always, sometimes goes through paper. So we'll try that as sort of a stretch for this paper. This one, the chalk ink is my usual go-to when I'm journaling. And so we're going to try to stamp with that. So we're going to do the same tests in the planner, starting with the fountain pens, and then we'll move on to the dip pens and a little bit of paint as well as stamping. So what I like to do after the fountain pen ink dries is I like to take pigment black ink, and I like to draw details on top. And so that might be pushing this paper a little bit, but we will try it out and see. So just using the Kakimori dip pen, I put a little bit of black pigment ink. And so this is heavy duty, waterproof ink. So here are the final results and my thoughts. I wanted to do the writing and drawing test on both the cloth flex notebook as well as the weekly and daily planner, just to make sure that the paper behaved consistent between the two notebooks or between the two books. And I found that the results were consistent between the two. So I am just going to talk about the paper in the notebook. So as I saw, so after using standard tools, the type of sort of pens and brush pens that you would use in a planner or notebook, I found that there was no bleed through or ghosting. The pens, behaved the same way as they would on standard paper. I did find the paper really smooth to write on, and so that's something to keep in mind. It does feel really smooth and very nice to write on. So there's no texture there. And then I took it to the next level with fountain pen ink, because the 70 GSM Archivist paper is meant to handle fountain pen inks. And so I tested it with, broad nibs, waterproof inks as well. And then I went with a glass dip pen, dipped in fountain pen ink, a Kakimori nib, which is a dip pen. And then I tried painting with fountain pen ink using a paintbrush, as well as painting with watercolor paint, also using a paintbrush. And then when the ink and the paint dried, I used the Kakimori nib as well as the Kakimori pigment ink. And so I dipped it in pigment ink and drew details on top. And then I used a Versamagic, the chalk pad, as well as the Shachihara stamp pad. And this one tends to look more vibrant, but it also does a little bleed through in regular paper. So that was kind of the test for me to see in terms of stamp pads, which one held well. So the result is that there was no ghosting or bleed through of any of the inks. And you have a little bit of ghosting on fountain pen ink when you put down a lot of it. So when I used a dip pen and the paintbrush, you have a little bit of ghosting, so you can see a little bit through the paper, but it doesn't bleed through to this side of the paper. You do see a little bit of warping of the paper, which is typical when you are painting and also when you're adding water to as an element. And so when you're painting with inks or with paints, you'll see a little bit of warping of the paper, and that's to be expected, I think. So something to note is if you are putting down a lot of ink, you'll see a little bit of the water imprint on the opposite page. And an easy remedy for this is to use a pencil board or a piece of cardboard or something like that, so that, you know, when you're writing on this paper or you're doing a little bit of painting or putting down a lot of ink, you're not going to have the water imprint on the page below. In terms of stamp pads, neither stamp pad really affected or ghosted through. I think actually you can see a little bit of ghosting of the Shashihara, and that's to be expected because this type of ink pad does tend to be a little bit more saturated, and so you might see that a little bit through the paper. It doesn't bother me at all, so I'm okay with it. Just something to note, I guess. And again, you know, this paper handles fountain pen inks really, really well. So I'm kind of impressed actually in terms of how it handles it. Now, probably the only drawback that I would point out in my personal experience of using these tools is that I did not enjoy using a glass dip pen on this paper. Even though it's smooth for all of the other tools, I found that it was very scratchy on the glass dip pen. And while this nib is a medium, it actually showed more like a fine or an extra fine in terms of the ink. And just to double check that the glass dip pen wasn't it wasn't causing the scratchiness, I tested it on a 68 GSM Tomoe River paper, which you can find in the Take a Note planner. But you can see that it put down a lot more ink as a medium nib would, and it didn't feel scratchy on this paper. So I think it's just the glass nib on this paper, and it could be because it's uncoated. And so while it's smooth paper, perhaps the coating has something to do with it. So I'm not going to harp on it because out of all of the tools, all of the pens, all of the types of nibs and fountain pen inks that I used, the only issue I found was with a glass dip pen, which I don't use on the daily in my planner or notebooks really anyways. I did know that I was sort of pushing this paper a little bit when taking it, to the next level in terms of the types of dip pens and the types of inks that I was using. So if that's my only drawback, then I'm pretty happy with that. And maybe that could be good feedback in terms of the other types of tools that stationery people might use. Maybe not on a daily basis, but something that enhances our writing experience or drawing experience. So I think that's going to be my only sort of feedback in terms of improvements that can be potentially made on this paper. I don't know. But other than that, I found everything else performed really, really well. And probably the only other note too is that because it's uncoated, I had to sort of wait for the paper to absorb the inks and wait for it to dry. And so it did take a little bit of time for the platina it took a little bit more time for the Kakimori pigment ink to dry because it was sitting on top of another layer of ink. And so if you're going to be painting or layering inks on top of other inks, that's another consideration. It's just the dry time, or use blotter paper to absorb any of the excess ink, especially if you're writing in your planner and you sort of just want to close your book and move on. Just have a piece of blotter paper there and it will help you out there. And so my thoughts are, I enjoy this paper. I thought it was really smooth. I'm actually really impressed in terms of no ghosting or bleeding through, even though I kind of pushed it in terms of the nib sizes that I tried out. If there's any other tools that you want me to test out on this 70 GSM Archivist paper from Hemlock and Oak, let me know in the comments and I'll take a look and maybe do a follow-up. But I'm really excited to dive in and use these notebooks and use this notebook and this planner more on a daily basis and see how it sort of performs to the daily usage. Thank you so much for joining me in this video and taking a look. Let me know your thoughts or if you have any questions, and I'll look forward to using these books more on a regular basis. I'm Corolla. On socials, you can find me at From Corolla, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy planning. Bye.